for James. Are we good? So both for James and Jeremy, could you start by just giving a very quick introduction of yourselves?
Sure. Hey, I'm James Perillo. I work at Figment. I'm on the new it's a proof-of-stake infrastructure provider, amongst other things. We provide staking infrastructure for over 51 networks right now, across multiple ecosystems. And I'm on the new opportunities team for the protocol team. And we also do investing, and I lead the VC arm of Figment.
Hi, I'm Jeremy, head of growth at Balancer Labs. Balancer Labs is a core developer of the Balancer protocol, which is a AMM, automated market maker, that is designed to be highly flexible, customizable, and dynamic. So I think AMMs, the way we understand them in general today is that they provide token liquidity for traders. I think that Balancer goes beyond this concept by really acting as a primitive for developers that want to build a liquidity layer into any kinds of DeFi application or protocol.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Stanley, we know.
Hello.
So I'm just going to jump into it and lead with the first question. So layer 2s, bridges, and interchain communication has been a huge topic during Devconnect. I'm sure we've all heard a lot about it over the last 7 days or so. What is your team built or is building that could make your product more ready for this type of world? And could you share your thoughts on these topics as they're so vital during this Devconnect, the merge, etc.? Any of you can lead, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so Figment is a proof-of-stake infrastructure provider. So as far as building, we haven't built anything when it comes to bridges or L2s. However, we do provide infrastructure support and validate on, we're waiting for L2s. We're really excited for the opportunity to, and we're waiting to see what decentralization in L2s looks like. Right now, it's a question mark. But then on the bridge side, we provide bridge support for a number of different bridges. So right now we're supporting the testnet for Axelar. We're supporting Gravity Bridge Chain, which is both Cosmos-based chains. We are supporting Wormhole. So we're one of the 19 guardians on Wormhole, as well as like Sommelier and Yumi have their own like iterations of Gravity Bridge. And so while we haven't built anything, we spend a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time over the last like 6 to 8 months just thinking about bridges. We've invested in a few bridges, and a lot of the trade-offs, and we think about the trade-offs. There's also like a super important osmosis vote right now for a canonical bridge, because they want to choose a single bridge for the UI. And so we haven't built anything yet, but we are always thinking about it, and I'm really excited to talk about some of the issues.
Yeah, you're definitely enabling it at the end of the day.
So the Balancer DAO and community has built a innovative approach and sort of a scalable program called the Balancer Friendly Fork model. And this is a mechanism that I think community members we're sort of trying to solve for a while. How does Balancer expand itself into other ecosystems in a sustainable, scalable way without spreading thin the resources that are required to build the core protocol? And so what we came up with was what you can think of as a franchise model, where we invite and welcome developer teams who wish to deploy the Balancer protocol into other environments where it doesn't currently exist, to develop a relationship with the Balancer DAO. There are some requirements in terms of how that relationship works. One of the important ones is that is aligning financial interests. So allocating a meaningful stake in a newly deployed Balancer fork to the Balancer DAO, involvement in the Balancer community, engagement and governance. So essentially, this means like we have come up with a mechanism that allows us to grow and to give other developers and builders the incentive to do that work and really benefit from it. The first approved balancer fork is called Beethoven X. It's on the Phantom Layer 1 chain. It's been very successful and gotten a lot of traction. Amazing team. And they're super engaged in the balancer community. They've made multiple pull requests to the balancer Ethereum mainnet code. They make contributions to our project. They vote in governance. They speak. They share their perspective on important issues. So, just to wrap this concept up, Balancer is growing on multiple chains and ecosystems, and this is something we're going to see more of, I anticipate. And on the topic of bridging between these different environments, we're not bridge experts, so I don't think we see ourselves like building a bridge solution, but we're excited by all of the developments in the space today. It's probably the hottest area of DeFi right now. And yeah, we're definitely see some solutions that look interesting to sort of bridge liquidity from one chain, one layer to another. Balancer itself is officially deployed to Ethereum mainnet, Arbitrum, and Polygon. We have a friendly fork on Phantom. We have another friendly fork approved for Avalanche. And we have other proposals that will probably be coming through to our community soon for other chains.
Thanks. Who here has heard of a friendly fork before? Because it was the first time I heard it this week, and I was like, nice. Stanley?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Aave community, bridging and new networks has been always a way to kind of like bring a lot of like inclusivity into the community, and also kind of like reach out to new communities and expand like our ecosystem. And I think we started kind of like very early and pioneered it a bit in the sense that we were one of the first protocols that deployed to Polygon. And I remember, because like going back to those days, there was still kind of like very kind of like this Ethereum like core maximalism culture, and I personally I've been kind of like born and raised in the Ethereum community, and it's my kind of like a on-chain headquarters and for the Aave protocol as well. And I think we always been kind of like in the position that we have always taken this kind of risks where we try to kind of like expand the culture a bit, and Polygon was an interesting network because there was a lot of gaming activity. So gaming was one of the first things that took off on Polygon, because there was Aavegotchi and a bunch of other things, and an NFT ecosystem, because it's very low cost to mint an NFT there. So it already had a nice, vibrant ecosystem, but it didn't have much of DeFi. So that was kind of like one of the first things we did, and I think also with Polygon we somehow managed to come up with the idea that what if a layer one or a network itself creates incentives and kind of like tries with the incentives to invite the liquidity, especially during the times when transactioning in Ethereum was quite high and still is. And then, quite similarly, we started to expand to other networks, because with the concept of EVM, it makes it very easy to scale to other networks, and that happened essentially with Avalanche and a bunch of other of these networks. With the bridging, I love the concept of that you can bridge from one network to another, and you can choose where you want to hang or transact. And the issue is that where I'm becoming more skeptical is like how we can make these bridges secure, because we've seen different kinds of exploits. Some of them has been code exploits, but some are just social engineering, grabbing the keys of the multisig and then walking away with hundreds of millions of value. So this is where the kind of like the biggest issues are coming in terms of bridges. And I know like in version 3, we, as you all saw the presentation, we try to emphasize that we're now in a kind of like a multi-chain universe, and we have to find a way where we can bring capital efficiency, and that's how we allow with the ports to bridge liquidity seamlessly and fast between the networks. But I kind of think that where we might go in further, it's more of evolving the layer 2 infrastructure, because layer 2s can scale quite sufficiently, and you can actually you can inherit the security of Ethereum or whatever the underlying network is. So I think that will be where the main liquidity will be crossing, and we will see more evolvements. You still like the complexity comes where you have the way you have rollups now in Ethereum is amazing because it's permissionless, so anyone can create a rollup, and in some networks you kind of have to have whitelisting or become a parachain and whatnot. So like the challenge comes when, let's say, Avalanche has subnets, Ethereum has rollups, and Polkadot you have parachains. Like then you kind of like the ecosystem just expands within vertically like that, but you still have a lot of capital going from one place to another. So that's where like you still need bridging, and the challenges will be. But we want to be a part there, and we want to empower the bridges with the portals. But I'm just thinking that there's where the kind of like Achilles heel is at the moment.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question. If Jeremy or James wants to add on, is like, where do you see the problems in having that, either vertical scaling with layer 2s or the horizontal scaling in terms of cross bridging and things like this? Because it's not all roses.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely security issues, as Stani pointed out. That's the biggest thing that stands out. There are also like just kind of like practicality and UX issues. If you're, for example, using like a bridge aggregator, I feel like that's a thing that's like big right now. Like these aggregators of different bridges to essentially transact cross-chain. From like coming from a DEX AMM perspective, you're making a trade on a DEX on one chain between two DEXs on two different chains. By the time you bridge over from chain A to chain B, kind of in the conventional way of doing that, the price of the asset that you're trading for has likely moved, possibly significantly. So then, you might need to have like a very high slippage tolerance. It might be costly. You might end up failing often. Not that like no one is working on solving these, but there are just some practical issues that can make it suck, basically.
Yeah, so like I think it's interesting. So Stani, I think you mentioned L2s, subnets, parachains, all shared security models that are leveraging the security of like some sort of main chain in order to secure the assets on these roll-ups, for lack of a better word, or roll-downs, I guess, for subnets. I don't know. But so shared security is like one of the key components that seems like is potentially a solution for bridging. I mean, IBC is like, I think personally, the end game for interoperability, but we'll see. In addition to that, the bridge aggregators like scare the crap out of me. Like, what's worse, like putting all your trust into one bridge, or just saying, you know what, let's throw them all in one together and hopefully none of them get hacked. Whoa, that's like really scary. But there may be value to that as well, right? Because it's like not all or nothing. Yeah, so I think essentially like where the trade-offs are, and I assume most people already know this, is that there's like a few trade-offs that people are making, right? The first, like I think about it as like cost, speed, security. And maybe trust is security, or maybe it's not security. And so everybody has their own like preferences, where they want to put risk on, where they want to take risk off. And so like if you're looking for something really fast, you may have to like give up. The trade-off is like secure and cheap, right? Then like, well, you're not gonna get fast and cheap and super secure using like a third-party bridge. It's like not a shared security model. And so I think like different teams or different individuals and token holders will have like a different like risk profile. And so like an aggregation of all of those where you're like, well, look, I just want secure. And it's like, well, okay, well now you're combining secure with fast and other things. So it's a really interesting space. There are new solutions coming out consistently. Arbitrary messaging seems to be like the new hot thing with like layer 0, and I think Nomad is also doing it, but in an optimistic way. So there's like a little bit of a time but a time trade-off for more security, arguably. Yeah, so I guess I'll stop. I'll end with. I actually have a question. So Stani, it sounded like they were like bridged. Like there's like a whitelist. What are like the qualifications for the whitelist? Is it a governance proposal? Are you guys going to kind of handle that at least initially, internally first before you like open it up to governance? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so basically there is kind of it's all up to the governance. So they can there's a framework in terms of different kinds of like qualifications depending on the reputation and also the like essentially how the framework works is that a potential port comes to the Aave community and there's a template framework and they describe their project, because it might also apply to non-bridge that just wants to become a port and has some sort of use case. And the idea is that the governance will assess per port the depth cap and reviews it periodically. So it's very kind of like a governance process. I personally want to see more like governance minimization. So maybe like there could be some sort of idea of involving maybe the some sort of a staking that could help to actually increase and decrease the depth caps of how much you can get as a port liquidity. But at the current moment, it's pretty much up to the governance to decide which bridge to trust.
Which leads me perfectly into my next question. Ultimately, with bridges, there's lots of places where you can put liquidity, but it's not also about liquidity. It's also about the governance. It's also about the staking, and it's kind of causing, arguably, maybe a big diversification in the space of both attention and all of those things. Like, you know, how right now there's just a lot of innovation happening in these space, which has the consequence of this splitting. Like, how do you see that evolving, types of tools like what you just mentioned, or ideas on where you see that going in the future?
I would just comment, like, I think one of the challenges that I think there's, you know, several teams working on solving is when you shift from a you know, transacting within one chain or within one layer, one environment, to a cross-chain, cross-layer transaction, you lose the ability to perform like atomic transactions, where there's one transaction which contains multiple transactions, I guess. And I think it's a huge benefit of you know, in today's landscape, transacting in one environment, but replicating that experience as much as possible, I think would be really key to the space.
Like diversification, so I'll read it directly. How do you envision governance, staking, liquidity on multiple chains at the same time?
It's a great question. I have a feeling it's going to be that arbitrary like cross-chain messaging is going to be like the solution. It sounds like, at least so far. I just keep, I guess, shilling like IBC, but they're coming up with like interchain accounts, and so interchain accounts will allow you to like control assets that are held on multiple chains through a single account, and will allow you to like be able to vote on like depending on whether you're holding tokens on like this L1 or that L1, you'll be able to vote from a single account. So that's kind of interesting. But
Yeah, there's the Slido. In a minute, we're going to get around to the questions. And so, yeah, like that's the place to start to contribute to those.
Unless you're eager already to ask.
if you're really eager, let's go for it. Aggregated IBC bridges.
Do you like them?
Well, so so one thing we haven't talked about yet when it comes to bridges, which is probably like the red herring, is like composability. And so composability meaning that, you know, let's say you take ETH and you move it over to Polygon and you use two different bridges, right? So you have like this bridged version of ETH. Those two ETH are not the same ETH. You can't, like, you have to trade those for each other, right? So both are IOUs or like some sort of like coat check. And so you can always go back to the old chain, assuming, and try to get your coat when you give back the coat slip. Hopefully your coat's there, and the coat wasn't, and the dressing room wasn't robbed. IBC actually sees the same issue. If you go from, let's say, we'll name 3 like Cosmos chains, right? So like, or 4. So let's say you go from Cosmos Hub to Stargaze to Osmosis with your Atom, and then you go from Cosmos Hub to Yumi to Osmosis. And that's just the path that those transactions, that IBC router took. Those assets are also not composable. Like they are not one and the same. They can't go into the same LP, the same pool. And so ultimately, where like the exciting part of like parachains is that, and what maybe the Cosmos Hub was supposed to be, was that it was supposed to be like sort of like this router, like the hub, right? And so all transactions would like bridge to and from this single point, making composability like a better, like an easier solution, right? Where you won't have like multiple iterations of the same asset just floating around all over the same, like a single sort of like ecosystem, which I think is super compelling and super interesting. So from an aggregator perspective, I haven't heard of an IBC aggregator yet, but yeah.
I'm also like very excited about IBC. I think it was more like first love in terms of like bridging messaging between different protocols. And I think also like maybe what could be interesting is that if there's more kind of like a frameworking between networks, and because usually all the developments in different networks, it's quite siloed in the sense that, you know, the Ethereum community looks into, you have the improvement proposals, application, or the infrastructure, and different networks, and communities, they look what other folks are doing. Would be cool to see some sort of a framework where everyone comes together and thinks how to kind of like improve the whole underlying infrastructure that is more, could talk more to different networks and more compatibility. And that will be like a good for everyone. And I guess because the bridging is just one issue, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be other technical challenges over the line that, you know, you have to, as you have the same users just using multiple networks, so you kind of like have to figure out like more universal solutions as well.
Cool, thanks for sharing. Just for the audience and also for anyone on the live stream, going to ask questions in probably like 5 minutes or so, and I'm just going to work my way through. The last question, maybe 2 that I have is, once Layer 2 start introducing their incentive programs, how are Layer 1s going to still compete for the whales that are looking for the returns, the yields, and also other users?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they can live like together.
Friend.
So that's my short answer.
Friendly incentives. I I agree as well because I think people should transact pretty much where they feel they're part of the community, because what the incentives are doing is that they're, it's not incentivizing you only to kind of like bring your asset and into a network, but it's also like giving ownership of that community. And I think Polygon innovated it quite interesting way, because they started to give those incentives to users and to different protocol users, and based on the liquidity, and you suddenly have a stake in that ecosystem more and more. So that's one thing, and I think everyone wants to have like more than one kind of like a favorite protocol and network. But eventually, with the layer 2s, what's fascinating is that not just that they have separate communities, but they might have separate use cases. So you might see a layer 2 that just focuses on specifically on payments and has interesting economics in the underlying network, or focuses on, let's say, gaming, and you have different kind of audience there. So I think, and for the underlying, like the layer 1s, it's all good business, because they're settling their transactions, and the future Ethereum could look like just a place to store hashes and do very minimal computation, and then you have this like bunch of layer 2s then where you have the most transactioning.
Adding to a point that was just made, these incentive programs, they bootstrap liquidity. They also bootstrap community, and they also bootstrap ecosystem. Liquidity is the most fleeting of those, right? It just kind of flows very freely from one place to another, depending on where it gets most ROI. Community is more solid when you build engagement and you create a community that doesn't necessarily get up and leave so easily when incentives are more attractive somewhere else. And the most solid is an ecosystem of builders, right? And I think that's what these incentive programs target the most. It's like attracting settlers to come and build and plant roots here. And when you build like a protocol, you are making a significant investment that is not easy to divest and move, just kind of get up and leave necessarily. Also, composability plays into that very much. So if you do this well, then you build an ecosystem of builders that compose and integrate with each other, which makes it even more sticky for them to stay, and it makes it even more of a long-term commitment. So I think, yeah, layer 2s have been lacking in competitiveness because they have not had the ability to deliver these incentives. I very much look forward to them having that firepower and seeing what they can build and who they can attract. And I think that the L1s that have successfully attracted, strong ecosystem growth cannot lose it overnight.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what those incentives look like, right? If you look at like the parachains for Polkadot, for example, the collators are like there's no security. The security is like secured by the relay chain, right? The security of these L2s on Ethereum are secured by Ethereum, and so like, what is the need to stake? Is there a need to stake? How distributed or decentralized, and how many sequencers does a rollup need? Well, arguably one, because there's L2s right now that are operating with one sequencer. So that's sort of a single point of failure, although there are escape hatches. But like, what will the incentives look like is a super interesting question. And like, there are parachains that are offering, you can stake your assets it's really just like sort of like an incentive. It's like an inflation for inflation's sake to get. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
We'll see. All right, I'm going to jump into the audience questions, which is, the first one is, what percentage of your community is today actually using blockchain for real-life transactions as opposed to investment speculation or solution building? We're going to quick fire through these, so...
Well, I think like there's sort of transactions that, especially within the Web3 community, where there are a lot of people who take payments in stable coins, might be salaries or contract work. So like within the ecosystem, quite a lot. But of course, outside it's a different story. But really, if you go to certain countries, for example, like Argentina, I mean, almost second person holds their crypto, but also they transact quite a lot by using crypto. But what they're actually using is, does anyone know what people use in Argentina for transacting with crypto? Which network?
Lightning?
Yeah, basically Binance database. So in Binance, you basically can transfer funds to another account to your friend, and Tron is the second most popular. So transaction costs matter, but also it shows that there's actually real demand there for crypto payments, and it's convenient. And I personally think the rollups are the way to go. Especially with stablecoins. I think stablecoins could be minted in a secure network with collateralization, let's say, for example, in Ethereum, but then the actual distribution and the use can happen on these rollups, because you can minimize the cost or even bear the cost for the network. And I think actually we have now, first time ever, for this kind of like a situation where we could actually see a stable coin on a rollup that's going to get adoption, like organic, real adoption, either on internet payments or replacing Binance in Argentina. So this is something I'm expecting quite a lot, because this was very difficult to achieve before. I mean, when you pay $5 coffee with $10 transaction fee, that's very hard to argue. But now with rollups, you can actually achieve a state where stablecoins are used in real economy. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and to build upon that, one of the other questions here is, nobody wants, I quote, okay, no one wants L2s, everyone just wants cheap fees. What still needs to happen before users will not know/care where their money is at anymore? Because I think that builds upon what you were saying.
I think that we should also include in this equation the developers, that like, where do they want to build solutions for users to use? And they have different considerations, such as security. So I agree with the sentiment of this question, which is that the end user is doesn't care as much of what the underlying infrastructure is. That's normal. That's how it is. That's how it is in any like technology that we use in our daily lives. I don't know what satellite systems use when I call people on my cell phone, and I don't care. I just care that it works. So same principle applies here, but I guess the point that I wanted to make is that the users ultimately will use the best products and will flock to the best experiences, and those will be built by the developers that kind of choose the best infrastructural layer to achieve those goals.
Yeah, so like another, just to build on top of that, it's gonna, like, the question essentially is like also asking, like, when do we get to extract away what chain we're on and we're just transacting, which is ultimately going to require like a lot better like tools. and like middleware. So like, for example, Dora, like search on Dora is trying to do like a multi-block chain, multi-bridge explorer, right? And so what that should hopefully do is like, it shows you kind of like where your assets have come from, where they went, and where they are now. Like that's the type of thing that's going to need to be like, it's going to be like required in order for people to know where their assets are. And then ultimately like wallets that can be like a multi-chain wallet where, you know, it just shows all my assets. It doesn't quite actually tell me which, or maybe it does tell me where they are, but it doesn't really matter. I can just send ETH, whether it's on the L2, whether it's on the L1, like that's the one I want to send, and I want to send it there. And I don't care about anything else. Just do it.
Dreamy.
Yeah.
All right, we've got time for 2 more questions. We're already over a little bit, but I want to give you guys the opportunity. So place your votes now for the next 2 questions. I'm going to ask the one that's the top. Actually, no, you just answered that. And so the second question is an IBC question, fanboy.
Okay.
IBC is the core interchange security layer. Why shouldn't the lowest layer be protected by the largest capital, brackets, ETH?
No. So the way that IBC is like built into the protocol. So it's a function of just being able to enable the connection, and then it's there. You know, the one thing that if I was to like change one thing about IBC, it would be that relayers currently are not like being incentivized to run relayers. It's essentially like a public good, and people are just doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. Which is weird for crypto. Usually there's some sort of incentive. And so an incentivized version of IBC is probably like, I would assume the way to go, maybe. If anyone's building one, let me know. But I think there's like different models. You know, a security model. I mean, the other thing about that is that what that does, if that Cosmos ecosystem all has IBC, then arguably like, that's like $140 billion that's securing IBC. It's not just one chain, it's all of them. And so that is I think that's a compelling use case for it. And the more chains that can enable it, like so Solana should be able to enable it. Ethereum arguably could enable it without changing too much other things. And all of a sudden, you know, we're all connected.
Cool. There's a joint first place, so I'm not going to ask the questions that are here, but I will ask as a closing comment, is there anything that you would like to share with the ecosystem, words of wisdom, an opportunity that you think someone needs to build and fix that problem? We can go one by one.
Well, I think one important aspect is the governance and DAOs. So I think like there's a lot that we can improve in the governance tooling. That's one thing, but also making voting less painful, less costly. Aave has a cross-chain governance module, so we tried to innovate a bit further as a cross-chain protocol where you know, you can vote on a proposal that is in Polygon and vote on layer 1. Other stuff we're looking into is how you could actually use Starkware as well to vote on proposals and then submitting them on chain. But I think this area is like heavily underexplored in my opinion, and we just need more tooling and more flexibility, and also different kinds of governance models. So we have like the most common is the like one vote, one coin idea, but there could be arguably other governance models based on some other merits or some new systems. So I think this is like very heavily under explored area. If someone is looking to build something, this could be very interesting.
Cool, thanks. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll just share something that's on my mind, but you know, partially thanks to Stani throwing such good parties, you know, I'm running at low capacity, but something that's on my mind, like when you try to scale a project or a team in this space, I think you quickly realize that there's not enough talent and like resources within this space for us to actually grow the way that we need to. And so what I mean by that is it's very important for us to continue to kind of onboard people from other industries and other disciplines into Web3. That is the fuel that we really need in order to grow this space, in order for the projects in this space to really scale and really have the resources that they need to make the kind of impact that we can make. And I love seeing that. I think these conferences are always a great opportunity to see that there are really bright, passionate people who are sort of being attracted. But I think as a community as a whole, we need to continue to remember to like open the doors and really, reach out and bring more people here.
Educate, don't chill.
Yeah, and I guess IBC, like incentivize IBC. I think I said I'd like to say. But other than that, I guess both great things. Both of you guys said great things. Like I think vote. I think like just actually using those governance tokens and actually learning about like the network and the project or the protocol that you're like holding tokens on, and then actually participating in governance is a super important and like often delegated away to other folks. And so I just think if there's one thing I could say about that, it would be like just like try it, see how it works, see why it doesn't work or why it does work, and what would you like to do differently about it, and what would you like to see differently about it. There's a lot. There's a lot of interesting governance votes out there. There's a lot of like mob mentality votes out there sometimes. And so it just, the more you engage in the space, the more the space engages back with you. And like ultimately we all learn valuable lessons, either the easy way or the hard way, but we learn them together. So thanks for the time also, Jonathan.
Ooh, thank you, guys. Please give it up for these amazing panelists.
Thank you.